What were you like when I was 25?
Can you get a job or a career? Can you educate yourself? Do you do anything that's remotely resembling civic responsibility? You go to church. I don't go to church because, their beliefs don't match mine. It's like, you don't even have beliefs.
I will now stick this bottle in my asshole to save society. So, it's the 1980s. Lady Diana is getting married, hacky sacks are all the rage amongst the coolest kids in school, and most importantly, these two lovebirds
are threatening to blow up the world.
It's the Cold War. And like any good lovers quarrel, all the ugly mutual friends of these two countries were forced to pick sides on who they wanted to be friends with more. Did they want to be based communist comrades with the Soviets, or did they want to be freedom-loving capitalist scum like the US of A? And the ugliest of these mutual friends was the entire continent of Europe, which basically got divided into half between communist countries and capitalist countries. So, less to say, tension in Europe was very high. In one of these communist countries, known as Yugoslavia, lived a legendary man. His name was Dorde Martinvoic. Dorde was a 56-year-old grandfather working 2 jobs trying to support his family. One of his jobs was as a farmer, and the other was as an alleged storekeeper for the Yugoslav army. By all fronts, Dorde was just an ordinary guy. But little did Dorde know, his anus was about to change the world. See, another thing about Dorde you need to know is that Dorde was a minority Serbian man living in a majority Albanian part of Yugoslavia. An important thing to understand is that in Yugoslavia, everybody hated each other. Yugoslavia was made up of 6 equal but autonomous republics, and as such, multiple different ethnic groups like Serbians and Albanians. This caused a lot of tension between the different ethnic groups because they all had their own level of ethnic pride. Additionally, Yugoslavia being communist made these tensions worse. Certain republics in Yugoslavia believed that other republics weren't putting in enough work economically but benefiting all the same because of Yugoslavia's communist structure. This made certain republics in Yugoslavia hate other republics and the people in them, causing nationalism and ethno-nationalism in Yugoslavia to rise. President of Yugoslavia, Tito, seeing everybody hating each other as a fucking problem, decided to go in his Nick Fury bag and basically told everyone to chill. And, for the most part, it sort of worked. Tito was able to unify and glue Yugoslavia back together by making nationalism a taboo. To put it into perspective, nationalism in Yugoslavia was, by today's standards, everybody just ignoring the fact that Angelina Jolie probably sat on her brother's face once or twice. Everybody knew it was probably happening, but nobody talked about it in public. But then, Tito died, and that's when our boy Dorde comes in. On one sunny day in 1985, a nurse saw Dorde walk into his local hospital. Dorde was slumped over, sweating, and red in the face. He was clearly in a lot of pain. So, the nurse goes up to Dorde and asks if he's okay. Dorde nervously says no. The nurse then asks what's wrong. Then Dorde hesitates for a second, looks at the nurse, and says, I have a glass bottle lodged in my asshole. The nurse is absolutely horrified and asks, fucking how? This is when Dorde goes on to explain what happened. Dorde claims that allegedly a group of masked Albanian men had targeted poor Serbian Dorde, knocking him out and dosing him with a morphine-filled syringe. While Dorde was knocked out, the men then apparently took a 500ml glass bottle and shoved it inside of Dorde until it broke. Doing this absolutely disgusting story that can honestly only be classified as an essay-based hate crime, everybody that heard it was mortified. I mean, the nurses were mortified. I'm mortified. You're probably mortified, but the police, they were bamboozled. That's when things get dubious. A little time later, the local police, accompanied by, oh yeah, the fucking Yugoslav People's Army colonel, went to interrogate Dorde about what happened to his anus. And allegedly, during this interrogation, Dorde admitted to the colonel that his initial story was a lie. There was no Albanian men or morphine-filled syringes. None of it was true except for the glass bottle. Instead, ordinary old Grandpa Dorde had taken a stick, attached a 500ml beer bottle to the end of it, stuck it in the ground at his farm, and then bare-cheeked Yokozuna bonsai dropped onto the bottle because he was a horny horny boy. However, because of Georgie's muscular elderly ass clamps, the bottle, when inside, had ended up breaking, causing him to immediately seek a local hospital. But once he got to the hospital, embarrassed about his ass-tacular mishap, Georgie had decided to, fuck it, lie. Taking this new version of events as Georgie's confession, local Albanian community leaders who were being attacked by Serbian news outlets about the story had decided to run with this new version of events that Georgie had confessed to the colonel. So case closed, right? Georgie decided to stick a bottle in his ass because he was a horny boy. Eventually it broke. He got embarrassed and didn't want to tell the real story, so he lied about 2 Albanian. That's it. That's the end of the story. Oh, wait a minute, because however, that's when another twist in this Benoit Blanc-esque mystery occurs. Georgie, after confessing, was transferred to a military medical academy where a medical team took Georgie's new confession story, looked at the details of it, and said, nah, that shit's fake. The medical team had concluded that because of the amount of force and damage to Georgie's buttocks, there wasn't enough physical possibility for a guy to just do that themselves. It didn't make any sense. Because the injuries were so deep, it required an amount of force that physically would have been impossible for Georgie to do himself, meaning that at least 2 people had to be involved, which thus gives credibility to Georgie's original confession. But then everybody's questioning, how can that be possible? Georgie clearly confessed to the authorities and the fucking army colonel. But that's when people started to question, why exactly was the army and the colonel even involved in the first place? So allegedly, it's theorized that the army and the colonel, in an attempt to mitigate growing tensions after President Tito's death, had forced a confession out of Georgie. Georgie, who, keep in mind, was an alleged storekeeper for the Yugoslav army. So people believe that the army had essentially pressured Georgie through some sort of benefit or some sort of incentive to lie about sticking a bottle in his asshole as a means to prevent ongoing tension between ethnic groups in Yugoslavia. This is when allegedly another commissioned medical team was asked to investigate Georgie's anus. This team concluded that the previous medical team at the medical academy was just stupid as fuck. They had a critical oversight in that they didn't consider that after Georgie sat on it, he could have fell, and his body weight could have produced enough force to then cause the damages that we saw on Georgie. So ultimately, this team concluded that 2 people didn't need to be involved, and instead, Georgie could have just done it himself, giving truce to his confession that he gave to the police and the colonel. Allegedly, at this point, the Yugoslav secret police even got involved, ultimately unofficially concluding that Georgie just did it himself. But once again, in the contrary, after a court case regarding Georgie and the bottle incident a few years later, the courts found that the state was actually guilty of concealing truth, meaning this Yugoslav secret police could have just been, once again, capping. So at the end of the day, nobody, not even Scooby in the gang, could figure out what exactly happened to Georgie's buttocks. Nobody was ever able to officially conclude whether the bottle incident was caused by a horny Georgie or was actually caused by 2 Albanian men who were trying to basically do a hate crime on a minority Serbian. Naturally, this is where we end the story and we all say goodbye, and it's an unsolved case, right?
Wrong.
Because this incident spiraled and led to a domino effect which would inevitably lead to the complete destruction of Yugoslavia. Remember how I said ethno-nationalism was considered a taboo at the time? Yeah, all that went to shit after the bottle incident. Because no one actually knew what had happened, Serbian outlets and Albanian news outlets across Yugoslavia basically just went to war. The Serbs had decided to go with the first story regarding the 2 Albanian men attacking a minority Serbian in the form of Georgie, and basically started to claim all across Yugoslavia that Albanians were trying to ethnically cleanse the Serbs. However, at the same time, Albanians were going with Georgie had confessed to the colonel of Yugoslavia and basically claimed that Georgie was just a horny homosexual freak trying to blame Albanians because he fucked up trying to get his freak on. Even Croatians within Yugoslavia got into the mix and basically started shitposting with their news outlets, claiming that Georgie had actually jumped off a tree onto the bottle, which So after the bottle incident, nationalist propaganda was running wild, and everybody basically just went back to their own groups and started hating each other again. After this event, Serbians even started to liken Georgie's bottle incident to that of Jesus Christ being crucified. Georgie basically became a symbol for the Serbs, as Georgie's case was considered eerily similar to the Ottoman Turks who ruled Serbia in 1833 and who often used impalement as the form of torture. Albanian Muslims, on the other hand, took Georgie's case as a symbol of not being able to trust Serbians because they thought Serbians were trying to exploit the situation Georgie had put himself into as a means of trying to get their political agenda through. The bottle incident would even eventually, according to some people, be used as justification for the Serbians inevitably changing the Yugoslav constitution to allow them to have 2 provinces within Yugoslavia instead of 1. Serbians, with this changing constitution, started to grow their influence across Yugoslavia, even funding minority Serbian revolutions in other republics to basically overthrow their government, leading to the Yugoslav region becoming a full-on war zone for the next decade. Over the next decade, war crimes, genocide, and mass human casualties eventually leading to the complete dissolution and destruction of Yugoslavia. So in summary, was the bottle incident a main catalyst for the destruction of Yugoslavia? Of course not. There was other factors at play. However, did a guy in 1985 allegedly put a bottle in his own buttocks, which would then lead to a series of events which would help flame the ongoing fires of ethnic tensions within a region, which would then cause irreparable damage to the country and ultimately lead to its complete demise? I think so. So, moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, don't stick a bottle in your ass.